Good morning, everyone. My name is Selena Inoue. I am a former board member with the Mar Vista Community Council. I'm also a stakeholder for the Venice Neighborhood Council. I'm on their Parking and Transportation Committee and also their representative to the West Side Regional Alliance of Councils for the Mobility and Transportation Committee. I want to welcome you all to Congress LA 21. I hope so far you've been having a good day. I am here today because I proposed a workshop regarding board member bad behavior. I think that this is a topic that needs discussion by all of us. Since I suggested this workshop, I know that Dunn has come up with a proposal for modifying how the code of conduct is enforced. I want to say right off the bat that we are not going to be addressing that in this workshop. Instead, we're going to start a conversation among NC leaders on this topic and what neighborhood council boards can do and what tools they have to address this issue. Let me also say that as a retired social worker, when we talk about bad behavior, we're just talking about how people act and not who people are. This isn't a judgment call on anyone. I think the best of us on a bad day can slip into bad behavior. I think if we're hungry, if we're tired, if we're frustrated, if we're angry, chances are we might not behave or be on our best behavior. So we're focusing on behavior and how to change that behavior, how to model good behavior, how to get someone who's not doing well on the board headed in a better direction. I've assembled several different people today to discuss this topic. I know we're waiting on Sean and we're waiting on Vivian. Hopefully they will join us as they're able. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our panelists. I'm going to call on them one at a time. They'll each have 5 to 7 minutes to talk to you, all of us, about their experiences in regard to this topic and share with us some success stories about how they dealt with this important topic. So I'm first going to hand it over to Doug Epperhart. Doug is the chair of the Coastal San Pedro Neighborhood Council. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Selena. One of my favorite topics. So I've been doing this neighborhood council thing now for almost 20 years. Some number of years as president, some years not on my neighborhood council board, but I have seen it all. I have been the target over the years of many disgruntled board member as well as stakeholder. So I'm going to start with this. There are rules to this legislative game that neighborhood councils play. And one of the things that is the biggest problem, I believe, that leads to bad behavior by board members is a lack of understanding of those rules and how they are applied. The key to this is that the individuals on neighborhood councils understand their rights as board members, as officials of this city, and that they understand the role of the chair. But perhaps most importantly, that the chair understands their role. Many, many chairs of neighborhood councils think they are the boss, that what they say goes. They're not. In this game, they are not the coach. They are not the manager. They're the referee. It is their job to apply these rules in a fair and equitable manner to everybody, whether it's somebody they like or somebody they dislike. And I am just going to say the single most important thing for any neighborhood council board member It's something my younger daughter likes to say to me, because I behave badly too, is don't be judgy. Okay. That's important. And what I think what Selena said, we don't know what kind of day people have had, when they come to the board, and they're just human beings. And we need to keep that in mind.
So Doug, do you have a specific situation you wanted to share with us and how you dealt with it successfully?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing is I tend to try to use humor and a right attitude, a positive attitude. I'll give you an example. I can think of a board member that I dealt with this a couple years ago, who it was an important topic. The discussion was had. We were ready to vote, and this individual said, wait a minute, this is really important. We need to talk more about this. Now, nobody else in the meeting had anything else to say, frankly. And rather than saying, I'm sorry, we need to move on, we're going to take a vote, I followed what I call the ask, don't tell rule. And I said, however, it's the decision of the board. Would you like to afford this board member, say, another 15 or 20 minutes to talk about this? And one of the board members piped up and said, oh, hell no. Well, that got the laugh, and the individual understood that perhaps we should go ahead and take the vote and move on. And I think that's really critical for chairs. Don't be a dictator. Ask your board what they want to do, because they're the boss. It's their decision. So, maybe we'll get into a little bit about that later on.
Thanks, Doug. Next, I want to call on George Francisco to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his perspective on this topic. Go ahead, George.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to share the space with you here. There were a couple of things in my decade, I guess, of participation in neighborhood councils. As a community officer, the last 5 as a stakeholder, a community officer, and then the last 5 as the vice president of our neighborhood council in Venice. What I used to see in terms of board members behaving badly was board members insulting stakeholders, which I just did not find appropriate. I don't find a lot of the current climate and the rhetoric that comes into board members to my liking. I think it's counterproductive, but also, everybody has feelings. Everybody's a volunteer as a board member. So one of the things that I tried to work on as an executive committee member was making sure that our board members publicly were not insulting or demeaning, within some very, confined roles. Every once in a while, somebody's going to make a funny comment. Sometimes, it's just for a chuckle. That isn't a major transgression of civility or any of those things. But sort of with that, I would find that the insults and the rhetoric that would come at board members increased over the last couple of years. And another thing that I found was that our board members, as things become more partisan, you would get more aggressive behavior between board members. And Doug, I don't necessarily know. I believe that the chair of the meeting, which the chairing responsibilities, passing the gavel, very often fell to me. And I believe that the chair is there to make sure that your stakeholders get a chance to express themselves, but B, within your public discussions, to make sure that they're efficient and that they don't sort of drift into passion is okay, aggression not so okay, and they become partisan. And I believe you have to move things along, and sometimes you have to exercise that role as the chair to diffuse situations that if you sort of allow um, you allow your board to sort of control the gavel, it may lead to a situation that's not productive. The longer people go making their point, the more often they can they can look at somebody that's sitting, whether physically on the other side of the table or allegorically on the other side of a discussion, as an enemy, as opposed to somebody that has a right to express what they feel. So I do see it a little bit differently as far as what the chair's responsibility is. But I do find that a lot of our rhetoric nowadays is counterproductive. And at the end of the day, they may say that we're elected officials. They may, have this idea that we have to take these tests. But the truth of the matter is the city attorney has basically gone on record as saying we are nothing more legally than people that are members of an HOA. So it's the lack of sort of stakes, I think, makes it even more difficult to control people's emotions. And I'm not talking control people emotions. I'm talking about controlling the discussion, I think is more accurate what I want to say. So, I find that we're just in a situation where more and more people actively want to be on opposite sides of a discussion. And that's unfortunate. And, in our situation, it got to a point where we had to remove a board member at a certain point, which a different situation, but there was just really a lot of personal dynamics in that versus anything that was floating around. I don't know if the term's legislatively, but certain rules wise, I don't, from Dunn or even from our own set of governing rules. So apologize if I ran a little bit too long on there, Selena.
No, we're doing fine. I know we got a little bit of a late start, but I think we're underway and we're doing great. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Yes, we all had a little late start getting into this meeting, so thank you so much for being patient for that. I am interested to hear about your experiences, and I want everyone to know that you are actually a parliamentarian, gosh, I can't say the word, for the West Adams Neighborhood Council, right?
Yes.
So tell us how being a parliamentarian may help this situation, and share with us a story if you have one.
Oh boy. Well, first of all, good morning, Selena, and to all the panelists and attendees that are present. Thank you for inviting me into this space. I think the work that we do as neighborhood council board members is so critical. I was clueless as to what neighborhood council was until about maybe 3 years ago. I'm a school teacher for LA Unified, and on my campus where I teach, a charter school joined our campus and created rather a tremendous amount of tension. And so as a result of that tension, my school went to the neighborhood council to solicit their support that our school remain charter free. And so when I went to the neighborhood council, I was just amazed at how government was so close to where I lived. So there, it was just amazing to me that we can go to a neighborhood council that would hear our arguments, hear our concerns, and actually something may be done about that. So with that being said, that was how I got on board with the neighborhood council. I thought, my goodness gracious, I can be a part of this and definitely keep our school in the forefront of the neighborhood council's mind, and my school would be in the know and we would have all the support. Well, little did I know that the neighborhood council was so much more than about my concerns. It spans so much, so many more concerns and issues. And so I stepped into the neighborhood council almost immediately as an executive board member, voted in as the parliamentarian, once again, not fully understanding what a parliamentarian was. So with that being said, when I joined my neighborhood council, there was, to me, absolute chaos. And the chaos came from the board members. The ability to communicate to one another, with one another, in a way that was productive was absent. So the meetings were extremely long, and they were long because there were so many discussions, counter discussions going on amongst the board members. And it wasn't even, to me, in my opinion, it wasn't about the issues at hand. It was simply about personality conflicts. And so over the years, we've had some board members step down, and that certainly has helped and aided to us having a little more harmony. So, with the remaining board members, what I have done as the parliamentarian, number one, is to try to provide order, sticking to the agenda, being focused on the topics at hand, not allowing our board members or stakeholders to get so sidetracked with personal agendas, because we know everybody wants a platform to speak. We all do. We all want to be heard. We want to be seen. We want to be validated. And so neighborhood council meetings are that space for a lot of people, including board members. So allowing people to speak, to share their thoughts, to share their voices in a respectful way. So my role as a parliamentarian is to make sure that that respect is there. How do I enforce that? Lots and lots of redirection. I'm a school teacher. I've been teaching for 26 years. That's what I do in the classroom. So where I'm not looking to shut people down, we want to hear your voice, but we want to make sure that your voice is about the topic at hand. And so over the years, our board has grown way more harmonious. I feel that we have been more effective in addressing the needs of our constituents, and less time has been spent bickering. Um, so yes, that is some of the situations. We do have, in terms of our president, and anytime you have leadership, people for whatever reason have a propensity against leadership. No one wants to be told what to do. So when you step into the role as president or whatever the leadership is, people naturally come against leadership that's just, in the cards. And so with that being said, I think our president does a really good job of handling all the negative and, antagonistic things that come his way. And then as a parliamentarian, I've taken on the role to kind of buffet that, to make sure that our president is not ambushed with people's frustrations, because he stands in the role of leadership. Anyway, I enjoy this role as parliamentarian. I kind of see myself as the peacemaker. And I think that we're moving forward. We have a lot of work ahead of us in keeping our communication open and sincere and authentic, so that we are doing the best we can for our constituents. And so thank you, Selena, for having me. Thank you for listening to my thoughts.
Well, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. We were supposed to be joined by Vivian Swanigan from the Labor Relations Department of the City Attorney's Office, but I do see Erica Johnson Brooks in the audience. Erica, are you here to fill in for Vivian? If so, can you raise your hand and I can promote you to panelist? And while I'm waiting to get a response from Erica, I want to introduce you next to Maura Harrington, who is with the Center for Nonprofit Management. Mara actually worked with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment on the Civic U program. And I have talked to Mara a little bit about this topic. And Mara, tell us what the Center for Nonprofit Management might be able to do to help us with this situation.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for including me. I'm very excited, having been a volunteer myself and also in volunteer leaders, and doing a lot of my professional life and working with boards and groups, trying to be as effective as possible. At the center, we work with organizations, and we work with internal teams as well as boards of directors and collaboratives and partnerships to be able to better achieve goals. And I really appreciate all that you've said about the different roles of leaders and members, about being referees, peacemakers, and trying to bring people together. a few things that, I want to talk about is, what does bad behavior look like? And then I'll tell you how we help address that. When we see some of these groups, we first start with, we understand everyone's a volunteer and they're here, because they're interested and they're passionate about something, and for the greater good. And we try to focus on that. But there are a number of ways that it kind of is challenged. Sometimes people can't or don't show up. They may be late, they may not be showing up fully and have all their attention, and they may not be prepared for the discussion at hand. And one of the big things that we find that groups struggle with is how to keep everybody engaged and focused. And Sean, thank you so much for the redirection. Is exactly one of the things that we look at. And some of the other behaviors about not listening to each other, not engaging in productive conversation, and not listening to each other are really some of the big things. And I really appreciate Selena saying, as a social worker, how important it is to kind of understand the emotions and the intentions and not blame the person, but understand the situation. So as an organizational psychologist, I look at all the things, the rules, the procedures, and the dynamics of the group. And as we think about that, every group is different and they've had a history and they're challenged with new leadership and sort of the changing dynamics. And so what we really try to look at is help the group understand, I don't know if it was George or Doug said, understanding the roles and the rules, and having someone like Sean who can be the gentle enforcer and the peacemaker. But beyond that too, sometimes we find everybody needs to take a moment, a breath, to reflect on why we are all here together, and to focus on the why. We go through several rounds of why did you join? Why does this group exist? And what are we trying to do? And why are we getting off track? And to understand why things may be getting in the way for folks, and to try to focus on the larger goal. And sometimes it means spending a little time talking and getting to know each other a little bit better on a personal level, to kind of find that common thread through everyone's interest and passions. Not always easy, and sometimes it does mean that some things have to be addressed, head on. One thing I find that is often helpful, just like you're doing today, is to talk about examples or use videos that show, almost outrageous behavior, and then folks can start to think about why it starts to degrade the conversation and really kind of chip away at the effectiveness. I don't have a lot of time, but what we do is we come in and facilitate groups, talk to people individually, and do some training around a board, a council's shared goals and vision, and then some of the processes that are maybe not legislated by the rules, and how to build some commitment and shared understanding of what it looks like to be a functioning council, to be a functioning board, and to be able to identify and have the strength and the confidence to be able to raise one's hand to say, I don't think this is working right now, and to pull it back a little bit. So it's a little bit of the individual and the group, and personality is a hard thing. But how to help tap everybody's strengths, and then negotiate when the times get tough, which they always do. So we do some classes, and we do, as I said, some coaching and some facilitation of groups. So, and we'll provide some information after this, but we're really happy, as Lena said, we've been involved in this work, and we continually are looking to help really empower folks to, everyone wants to work at their highest level, and to understand why folks are feeling maybe a little less effective, and that often results in ineffective behavior. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Selena.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Mara. I know from personal experience, when I used to work in nonprofit, that the Center for Nonprofit Management offers a lot of really great trainings, which is why another reason I asked Mara to join us. And in my experience, I think once you have a new seated board, getting them started off with a board retreat where everyone talks about the rules, the regulations, shares a little bit about themselves, and works on team building, I think goes a long way towards preventing problems once you get started and dealing with the issues and stakeholders and the day-to-day business of being on a neighborhood council. I want to let everyone know that's here that you can go ahead and put your questions into the chat, and we will go ahead and start sharing those with all of the people here. The first question I have is, What can be done when a board member has a pattern of bullying via email to other board members? You want to go ahead and start with that, Doug?
I do actually, because having had long experience with this, I think my first encounter with a bully, I was in, I think, the 4th grade. And I'll tell you what I learned way back then. When you have a bully, you deal with them on day one. You do not stand by hoping the problem will go away. As a neighborhood council, when I became president again of my neighborhood council 4 years ago, the very first meeting, I did 3 training sessions with the incoming board. The very first statement I made at the very first meeting to these folks was, we are going to get to know each other. And I will tell you right now that for all of you and for all of the stakeholders and everyone else attending our meetings, it will be a place where there will be 0 tolerance for bad behavior. There will be people whom you do not like. There will be people who you make instant judgments about. There will be people who you do like. But when you are in a meeting bound by the rules and laws, you will behave. And it is my job to ensure that you do, not because I want to do it, but because that's my obligation on your behalf. Okay? I'll treat everybody equally. That's the very first thing that every neighborhood council board member should be told on day one. With regard to a person, now, with regard to this bullying, I'm assuming these are emails that this individual is sending to other board members, or maybe groups of board members. I would remind that individual, first and foremost, every communication you make, every text, every email, every utterance in a meeting is public record. Somebody can come along and say, I want to see all the emails that this individual has sent to others and make them public. You know, they can get up in public comment at your meeting and say, I see board member so-and-so is a real jerk. And here are the emails to prove it. At my neighborhood council some years back, somebody actually did that. They got up and they read emails from a board member. Okay. It's not a good place to go. Ideally, that person will get the message, but this is where, if you have a consistent behavior, rather than targeting an individual, if you're going to do it publicly, bring somebody in like Maura and say, at our next neighborhood council board meeting, we're going to do a half hour on what constitutes bullying, what constitutes harassment, and what's expected as the standard of the people who serve on this board. The other thing is, and this is what I tell everybody who has been a victim of this kind of harassment, document everything. Don't just run around and tell your friends about, keep the emails, make a record, inform the city attorney, for instance, just copy them on this stuff. Let them know that this is going on, as well as your neighborhood council board leadership, who may or may not be aware of or involved in it. Make it clear that you have an expectation that this will be dealt with, and that the responsibility for dealing with it is not the president alone, is not done alone. It is the other board members. You have a collective responsibility. The best disinfectant is light. Don't let the bully operate in the shadows. It can be ugly, but it's the boil you have to lance as fast as possible.
Thank you, Doug. I have another question. Um, the person says, we have a president that does think he's the boss and behaves like a dictator. What can we do about it? George or Sean, do you want to take this one?
Well, I'll try to, I know we're butting up against our time, so I want to leave time for Sean to make her commentary, but you know, as I said, you know, it's generally speaking not an easy job being a chair, and running a meeting, especially you know, when you get to a point where you have more than the amount of people contributing that we have in this room. This is more of a discussion, a little bit easier to have an open conversation. When you have 21 people, and you know, you have to be respectful of everybody's time, you know, your stakeholders and also your board members. You have a responsibility to move that along efficiently. Now, there is a line where you truly shouldn't be interjecting your opinions. You know, at a very base level, you know, a subject is going to come in front of you and you're going to take a vote, and you're going to vote one way and somebody else is going to vote the other way. And that's very simple. You should express what you're saying. You should take your vote, and you shouldn't be held to any sort of retribution or reproachments for the way you voted, because you're going to take another vote right after it. So the idea of moving through these things efficiently, giving people an opportunity to say something, you know, can wind up being a heavy load for some people to carry. I just think there's a very simple solution to that I personally, you know, ascribed to when I ran the committees that I chaired, and also when I would, that gavel would be passed to me in the management of our meetings, and you know, the chair should facilitate discussion, and the chair should just abstain. You know, and I think that's a fair way to take any sense of partisan dictatorship out of it. At least I found it effective. So, you know, I don't know how you feel about that, Sean, but you know, it was one of the things that I ascribed to.
We're actually almost out of our time right now. I know people are posting questions in the chat here about how they can reach out to Maura and to Doug with follow-up questions. So let's end with Doug and Maura, if you want to give out your contact information so that people can connect with you. And Doug, can you also talk about next steps with this conversation with Lank?
I'm so sorry, Selena. I was having technical difficulty. Doug, please forgive me for interrupting.
No, please go. I'm going to
Yeah.
type in my contact info.
Okay. So just to now, I know we're on borrowed time, Selena. Did you want me to go ahead and address it, or should we just go ahead and move forward?
No, go ahead. And if you could make a quick comment, we definitely want to hear from you.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. So in terms of leaders who act as if they're dictators, that is not our reality on West Adams, where I'm working at West Adams Neighborhood Council. That's not our reality, thank God. But we do have board members who think they are the leader. And so once again, as a parliamentarian, like I mentioned before, redirecting people. And that, of course, is hard when you're dealing with adults. You know, no one wants to be told what to do. That is the thing. So what we're doing, we are planning a retreat so that we can actually get to know each other as people. Because a lot of us have not spent time together in a space where we're looking at each other as just humans. We've been in a space where we're looking at each other as, you know, fellow board members. And so without that component, it is kind of easy to slip into the mindset that other board members and their opinions and thoughts are kind of on the rival end. So I think a really good solid retreat where you have a facilitator that knows how to ask the right questions so that humanity part of who we are steps into the forefront so that we can get to know each other as people, and then maybe have some compassion with one another in our views and our thoughts. Thank you, Selena.
Thank you. Final thoughts, Doug, Maura.
Do you want to go ahead, Laura?
I will just echo the humanity, and it's, really about, confirming and finding that common ground and the rules of engagement, right? As people and as, responsible folks trying to, represent your stakeholders. So I'll stop there. I put my info in the chat. So.
Thank you.
Okay, and briefly with regard to presidents who think they're the boss, there's more of you than there are of them. It's a numbers game, and I worked many years ago with another neighborhood council who had a president who had an absolute disdain for the rules. And they came to me and I said, okay, I'm going to teach you the rules of parliamentary procedure, and you're going to make the individual adhere to them. Every time the person tries to cut off debate or dictate, you say point of order. And in an ideal world, 3 or 4 or 5 of you call point of order. And then you explain to the individual, this is the rule, this is what you are required to do as the chair. And if that individual refuses, then you say, then I appeal the ruling from the chair. And yelling at a person, arguing with a person, I have a rule. The person who yells the loudest always loses. Okay, because everybody in the room now thinks that you're the bad person. So it's a matter of of knowledge, learning the rules, persistence in insisting that they be adhered to. And the president, who is a dictator, who is frankly the worst bully of all, will eventually get tired of it. I mean, you just have to honestly wear them down, and the rules are your friend. But you have to learn them first, and you have to have the courage to stand up and insist for your own rights. That's hard. That's really hard. I've been on that side, but like my mother used to say, sometimes you just have to put your head down and bully your way through it. And the reward is worth it in the long run, because it's not for you, it's for all the people who put you there to represent them and do good for your community. That's what you have to keep your eye on. And you always remember, this too shall pass. So that's my words of wisdom for what they're worth.
On that note, I want to thank all the panelists today for coming, and all of the participants for joining us today. I know we had a very short time, but I hope we started the conversation, and I hope that we will be continuing this in various places, including at Lank. I know that they're talking about the updates to the code of conduct there, and you're welcome to participate in those meetings and share your opinions and suggestions for how we can address this as a neighborhood council system. I'm going to leave you with the thought that if we all continue to focus on our stakeholders, I think that that will guide us in the right direction, especially on this issue. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.